Max, when it comes to this support to Israel in the United States, it seems, as you mentioned, there's so much concern of the people, the young people in the United States, that they're not anymore supporting Israel because of what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in the Middle East. But how is this movement going to be considered by Israelis as the last chance of Israel to have something, to do something in the United States? How important is this movement for Israel?
Well, it's critical. It's critical to Netanyahu as well because of where Israel is going politically. This is what my book Goliath, which I published in 2013, was about. It was about the consolidation of Israel as a Israeli politics and Israeli society as right-wing, messianic, essentially fascist. And I think my book painted a picture of a society that was primed for genocide. And then I went to Gaza the following year to cover Israel's war on Gaza in 2014, Operation Protective Edge. And what I saw was sort of a pilot program for a coming genocide. So what's happening now has been in the works for a long time. And the government that came in with Netanyahu, these messianic fascist figures like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, I used to see them when I would go in the Knesset for an interview. I would see them walking around and they were on the move and everyone kind of disregarded them as these obscure figures. But I could see that they had a long-term agenda and they really had they had their finger on the pulse of Jewish Israeli society. So Israel is transformed. Netanyahu is sort of holding together the government. And in a way, he sort of exists at the center of where Israeli society is. But then you have American society, which is moving away from that, particularly among Democrats and even among Jewish Americans who are not, who don't exist within these kind of closed Jewish communities like you see in New Jersey and Long Island, who just kind of have assimilated into American culture. They have no appetite for supporting the kind of politics that Netanyahu represents. So Netanyahu's only base among the American public is exclusively within the Bible Belt among Christian evangelicals who voted for Trump, but they themselves are moving away. And they're starting through the interventions of Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene to learn that there are Christians in Palestine, that there is the St. Porphyrius Church in Gaza City, which has been under attack, which has existed there since the 8th century. And this has been transformative for them. So Netanyahu sees that he's losing his last base, and all he's left with is the 1%, the influencers who are just Jewish Zionists who have no ability to who are losing their own ability to communicate with the conservative grassroots. I'm talking about Ben Shapiro, whose Daily Wire company has been collapsing. They canceled their credit cards last year. They're like ending their office space. They're leaving their office space in Nashville. Mark Levin at Fox News, he's just an artificial construction of the Murdoch family. He doesn't have an actual base. These are Netanyahu's voices in the US. And then he has his billionaires, the Bill Ackmans, the Ron Lauders. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to take TPUSA, which Charlie Kirk controlled, and what they've been trying to do for years is take this, which is a political empire that has an annual budget that's larger than the municipal budget of many small American cities, and use it as a host body for their agenda to prevent the conservative grassroots exodus from Israel's, to prevent the conservative grassroots from turning on Zionism. And then all of a sudden, Charlie Kirk realizes his own grassroots base that he commands at TPUSA is in full revolt. They're disgusted by the genocide. Some of them are disgusted by the genocide in Gaza, but what really upsets them the most is they start to see that their own government is under the control of a foreign entity, and that Netanyahu seems to even control Donald Trump. And so Charlie Kirk has to bridge the divide between all of these billionaire Zionist donors who built him up and helped create his political empire, and the grassroots. And the contradiction can no longer be squared. I mean, if you're watching this now, I'll have a new report up at the Gray Zone. In the days before his death, Charlie Kirk was having to carry out these Zoom calls with Netanyahu's cutouts in the US, top Zionist influencers and donors, almost every day. And they were breathing down his neck, and they were really worried about his upcoming speaking tour and what he was going to say. And they were basically telling him what to say. Some people on the call were the venture capitalist Sean McGuire, who's very close to Elon Musk, who owns a house in Israel, works at Sequoia Capital. Another one was Joshua Hammer from Newsweek, who's one of Netanyahu's key voices in the media. Another person was Bill Ackman, who I mentioned before, were on these Zoom calls, and a rabbi named Pesach Walicki from, I believe, Virginia in the United States, who runs all of these influencer programs to send Christian youth on propaganda tours of Israel. And they were telling Charlie Kirk what to say until like 24 hours before he was killed. And according to their own accounts, Charlie Kirk was arguing back. So what they face is a political tsunami in the United States, and they have no way of holding it back. And that's why in the wake of Kirk's death and in the days before his death, some of these Zionist money men have started a full-on takeover campaign of the US media, which we can talk about. It's like a full court press in the United States. Netanyahu had been waging a 7-front war in the region, and now the United States has become the 8th front. And they want to prevent anyone from being able to express themselves anywhere in the digital online ecosystem by just buying it all.
Yeah, actually, Pam Bondi was talking about it.
Yep.
She said that there is a difference between hate speech and free speech. How they're using the case of the assassination and what has happened in the aftermath of the assassination in order to somehow control the media in the United States.
Yeah, what is hate speech?
Alternative media.
I mean, can you define hate speech? I mean,
I don't have any sort of idea of what they're talking about, because hate speech in their mind is something defined by their sort of ideas. I don't know if we know what that would be.
Exactly. And hate speech has been thought of as a project of the political left traditionally. The left was advancing it on behalf of those who they considered to be oppressed groups who faced violence from not just right-wing vigilantes, but from state violence, because they were historically oppressed. And so you couldn't, hate speech laws would punish people for using, for example, the N-word or inciting against minorities. And now, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death, the political right, but really Trump Incorporated, has shown its own hand and wants to institute, according to Attorney General Pam Bondi, hate speech laws to crack down on their own political enemies, which represents the left, which includes historically oppressed groups. And they're going to do it to protect the 1%, including one of the most privileged groups in the United States, American Jews. The Donald Trump administration came into office promising to destroy DEI programs. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which are sort of a liberal or neoliberal interpretation of it reflects a neoliberal interpretation of civil rights. It's basically, if you take the class component out of civil rights and you advance minority ambitions within corporations or within the military, by giving them preferential admission treatment. They want to eliminate that. But at the same time, they are providing DEI programs specifically to wealthy American Jews to please the billionaire donors of Netanyahu, who are simultaneously paying for Donald Trump's campaigns. So most recently, the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is a wing of the US government which has funded the arts. And the right wing of the Republican Party has always tried to defund this entity. The Trump administration is funding it, and they're now allocating the largest grant in the history of the NEH to something called the Tikva Fund, which is a Likudnik Israel lobby organization, which counts among its board members and fellows Bari Weiss, one of the premier voices of the Zionist 1% in the US, and Brett Stevens, who is the in-house Israel pro-Netanyahu propagandist at the New York Times. And these are wealthy people who don't need grants or support. It's just a way of paying back all of the ultra-Zionist donors. So they've done, the Trump administration is administering DEI, Jews-only DEI, which will only actually fuel more anti-Jewish sentiment among the conservative grassroots. And they are going to, at the same time, impose censorship on those who that group considers their opponents, supporters of Palestine, Muslims, the anti-war movement, direct action protesters. Donald Trump has just classified Antifa as a terrorist organization in the wake of Charlie Kirk's killing. What is Antifa? Again, it's like hate speech. It's something that's totally subjective that cannot be objectively classified. Antifa is an amorphous network of basically anyone who wants to go out and carry out direct actions against what they consider to be fascism. And they do property damage, and they have engaged in kind of like fistfights with the vigilante wing of the Republican Party, the Proud Boys and groups like that. They usually lose. But the important thing to know here is that Antifa, while not being a formal organization, is also heavily infiltrated by law enforcement. Any cop or FBI agent can just put on a mask and join their protests and get in their Discord chats. And that means that by classifying Antifa as a terrorist organization, what Trump has done is created the perfect terror factory for generating government plots to turn up the temperature and turn up the fear, and then manufacture consent for more repression. This is precisely what the FBI did during the George W. Bush and Obama era, when over 90% of all terror plots in the United States that were stopped by the FBI, according to researcher Trevor Aronson, were actually hatched, manufactured by the FBI itself. They were all controlled plots. And I can rattle off some very specific ones, but you had, like, at one point, the FBI actually following in a car behind shooters who they directed to attack a Draw Muhammad competition, an Islamophobic Draw Muhammad competition in Texas. The FBI followed the car of the shooters that they had personally groomed to attack this contest, and then watched as they were shot by security. And then, the public was told the terrorists from ISIS had come to shoot up this free speech competition. So get ready for more of that under Donald Trump, as Antifa is classified as a terrorist group, along with unprecedented censorship and crackdown on all domestic criticism.
Isn't that amazing that the case of TikTok is somehow, how they came out with the solution for TikTok is they're changing the TikTok the way it seems that the tone is changing in favor of Israel. That's why they're okay right now with TikTok. What was in their mind, and what are we seeing? How can we understand their policy in TikTok? Because we don't see that much of rhetoric that we have heard before in the initial days of the administration. It seems the tone is changing toward TikTok.
Netanyahu's billionaires. If you're watching this right now, by the way, I keep using that term, but look up Netanyahu's millionaires. It started with this term kind of started with a 2007 Ynet or Yediot Aharonot article in 2007 in Israeli media, where they uncovered a list Netanyahu had personally drawn up, handwritten list of 50 millionaires and billionaires inside the United States that would support his campaigns. Israeli media has updated that list. And one of those billionaires in Netanyahu's back pocket currently is Larry Ellison, whose Oracle company which is a data company, was launched with support from the CIA, is one of the CIA's top contractors, is building data centers across the US to fuel the so-called AI revolution. And Larry Ellison is a fanatical Zionist who has hosted Netanyahu on the Hawaiian island that he personally owns, on his own private Ellison Island. His son, David Ellison, is also an ultra-Zionist who's been heavily involved in coordinating with the Israeli government on anti-BDS activity, anti-boycott Israel activity. And Larry Ellison is now at the forefront of a campaign to buy TikTok to suppress Palestine content, which criticizes Israel, to censor influencers who are critical of Israel, who are getting millions, if not billions, of impressions, and to create a Zionist media monopoly in the United States. Larry Ellison's son, David, is subsequently working to buy CBS News, which will then install Bari Weiss, the top media voice of pro-Netanyahu Zionism in the US, as editor. They've already brought in someone named David Weissman to be the ombudsman, who is a veteran Israel lobbyist. And Larry Ellison has announced his intention to buy CNN, which is already basically a propaganda arm of Israel, but through its international bureau, they've done some critical coverage by reporting on what's actually happening in Gaza. They are desperate to crack down on any information getting to the part of the American public that is not already educated and red-pilled on this issue about the genocide that has been perpetrated in Gaza. They recognize that Israel is facing a PR disaster that is only going to get worse in the coming weeks and months, with possibly the United European Football Association banning Israel, which would be a very powerful blow against Israeli PR and lead to more boycotts in the world of international sports. So they're just trying to lock it down with a media monopoly. And Larry Ellison, who has donated millions of dollars to Friends of the IDF, is close to Netanyahu, is at the forefront. I should also mention Andreessen Horowitz, which is a major hedge fund run by Mark Andreessen, or venture capital firm. Mark Andreessen is also arms manufacturer. He wants to pioneer AI drones, and he's partnered with Robert Horowitz, who is the son of the late ultra-Zionist propagandist David Horowitz, who was one of Charlie Kirk's original mentors through the so-called David Horowitz Freedom Center. David Horowitz his main line was, the Palestinians are Nazis and they should just be eliminated and ethnically cleansed. And now his son and an arms dealer, a Zionist arms dealer, Andreessen, are partnering with Larry Ellison to take over TikTok. And I should also note that last year, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, the director, Jonathan Greenblatt, went to Israel and testified before the Knesset that there needs to be a media blitz that replicates what Israel did with its pager attack inside Lebanon. And he explicitly recommended buying TikTok as part of that media or public relations blitz. And so here it is. It's all happening right before our eyes.